The wind howled through the Valley of the Kings, shifting the sand just enough to expose the corner of something ancient, something wrong. Nahil Darwish had spent his career unearthing forgotten tombs, but this was different. The structure wasn't listed on any historical maps, nor did it match any known architectural style from the Old, Middle, or New Kingdoms. It was too perfect, its stone untouched by time. His team worked tirelessly for hours, clearing the sand away until they uncovered the entrance. The doorway was smooth obsidian, polished to a mirror sheen, and it bore no royal cartouches, no prayers to the gods, only a single line carved in a language that predated hieroglyphs. "We were never meant to be remembered." Nahil's hands trembled as he traced the inscription. Behind him, his colleague, Rami Hossein, exhaled sharply. This isn't Egyptian." Nahil turned to him, his throat dry. "Then who buried it here?" A cold silence settled over the desert as the sun dipped below the dunes. No one had an answer. The team stood frozen as the last rays of sunlight cast eerie shadows over the exposed entrance. Nahil felt an unsettling pull, as if the tomb itself was aware of their presence. The inscription, "We were never meant to be remembered," reverberated in his mind like an unspoken warning. But he had spent too many years chasing whispers of Egypt's lost past to stop now. "Bring the lights," he ordered, his voice steady despite the knot tightening in his gut. The team scrambled to set up floodlights, illuminating the obsidian doorway. Rami ran a hand along the smooth surface, his expression one of disbelief. "It's flawless. No tool marks, no erosion. This should have crumbled after thousands of years. Unless," Amira, the epigrapher, muttered, "it wasn't built by the Egyptians." The air seemed to thicken at her words. Nahil didn't entertain myths, not publicly at least, but standing before a structure that defied time itself, he felt the weight of something unnatural pressing against his chest. Taking a deep breath, he reached for his brush and carefully swept away the last layers of sand from the base of the entrance. A faint seam became visible, and with it, something else, an intricate mechanism embedded within the stone. Rami noticed it too. That's a lock. A mechanical lock," Amira whispered, stepping closer. "But this tomb predates all known locks by at least 3,000 years." Nahil glanced at her, then back at the impossible mechanism. There was no keyhole, no lever, nothing that suggested how it operated. "Then how do we open it?" Rami asked, hesitant. As if in response, the wind shifted again, sending a cascade of sand over their boots. And then, a deep, resonant click echoed from within the doorway. The team froze. Nahil stepped back instinctively as the obsidian slab quivered, dust trickling from its edges. Then, with an agonizing slowness, the door began to slide open. A void of pure blackness stretched beyond. And from deep within, something breathed. A deep, resonant breath echoed from within the darkness, slow, deliberate. It wasn't the gust of air from an ancient tomb unsealed for the first time. No, this was something else. Something alive. Nahil's skin prickled as the temperature seemed to drop. His team stood motionless, floodlights trained on the gaping void beyond the obsidian doorway, yet the light refused to penetrate beyond a few feet. It was as if the darkness inside wasn't just the absence of light, but the swallowing of it. Then the carvings on the doorway of faint etchings they had barely noticed moved. Not as if shifting stone, but like writing rearranging itself, alive in its own way. The once indecipherable inscription twisted into something new, something written in clear hieroglyphs this time. "You have found what should remain lost. Leave before you become part of it." A low murmur passed through the team. Amira turned pale. "Professor, we should step back. This isn't like any tomb we've uncovered." Nahil swallowed hard. He was thinking the same thing. Every instinct screamed at him to retreat. But something deeper, something primal, almost irrational, urged him forward. This was the missing chapter of Egyptian history. Not a forgotten dynasty, not a misplaced pharaoh's tomb, but something erased from time deliberately. He took a cautious step forward. The moment his boot touched the threshold, the darkness inside moved. Not like shifting air, not like shadows cast by flickering light. It moved as if something within was aware of them. Then came the whisper. Soft, ancient, hungry. You are not the first. Nahil's heart slammed against his ribs. The voice was not human. It was layered, as if many voices spoke in unison, threading through his mind. But you will be the last. A sharp crack split the air. Behind him, Romy gasped, staggering back. The floodlights flickered, then died in unison, plunging the entire excavation into darkness. The desert was silent. Too silent. Then, just beyond the doorway, something stepped forward. Not a man. Not an animal. Something that should have never been remembered. A sound, wet and deliberate, echoed from within the void. Not footsteps, something heavier, dragging. The obsidian doorway, impossibly smooth just moments ago, shimmered, as if reacting to the presence emerging from it. The air thickened, pressing against Nahil's chest, making every breath feel like inhaling sand. Then came the smell. Ancient. Damp. Wrong. Romy stumbled backward, his flashlight shaking in his grip. Professor, we need to go. His voice cracked, raw with fear. But Nahil couldn't move. His muscles locked as the thing in the darkness stepped closer. A whisper of movement, a presence unseen, but felt in the marrow of his bones. Then a hand emerged from the doorway. No. Not a hand. It was shaped like one, but the fingers were too long, the joints bent in the wrong places. The surface looked like desiccated flesh, yet it shimmered like polished obsidian, reflecting faint traces of light. When it touched the stone frame, the hieroglyphs burned red-hot, shifting again, twisting. We were never meant to be remembered. The sentence reshaped itself into something new. Now, you will remember us. Amira screamed. A wave of blackness poured from the tomb, swallowing the light, swallowing reality itself. Nahil felt his own shadow pull away from him, stretching unnaturally toward the doorway, as if something within was reaching for him. He wrenched himself backward just as the void lunged forward. The floodlights exploded in a shower of sparks. Darkness consumed everything. For one horrifying moment, Nahil felt the world rip apart, as if time itself had fractured. He saw glimpses, visions, flashes of things that should never have existed. A throne of black stone, built before the pyramids. Figures with elongated skulls, their eyes burning like dying stars. A city, buried beneath the Nile, its towers stretching downward instead of up. The first pharaoh kneeling, not before a god, but before something far older. Then, just as suddenly, the pressure vanished. The desert wind returned. The tomb stood silent once more. The team lay scattered across the sand, gasping for breath. Romy was clutching his chest, eyes wide with unspoken terror. Amira had fallen to her knees, sobbing. And Nahil. Nahil turned back to the doorway. The inscription had changed again. You are part of us now. His blood ran cold. Because the door was still open. And something had come through. Nahil's breath came in short, ragged gasps. His hands trembled as he stared at the inscription, its meaning sinking into his bones like ice. You are part of us now. The words felt less like a warning and more like a sentence, an irreversible fact. Behind him, Romy struggled to his feet, his face ghostly pale. Amira wouldn't stop shaking. The rest of the team had scattered in terror, some still lying in the sand, too dazed to move. But none of that mattered now. Because something had come through. Nahil turned slowly, dreading what he might see. The blackness within the tomb had receded, but the air still felt wrong. He couldn't see it outright, but he could feel it, a presence standing among them, unseen yet impossible to ignore. Then, the wind shifted. And for the first time he saw it. It wasn't a person. It wasn't an animal. It was a shadow but not cast by light. It moved with purpose, flickering between shapes, humanoid one moment, a twisting mass of shifting limbs the next. The air around it seemed distorted, bending and stretching as if reality itself refused to contain its form. And then it spoke. Not in words, not in sound, but directly into their minds. You were never meant to remember us. The voice wasn't singular. It was a chorus, thousands of voices speaking as one, layered over each other like whispers in the dark. But now you will never forget. Nahil's head pounded as flashes of memory, memories that weren't his, flooded his mind. He saw an ancient civilization, predating Egypt itself. A race of beings that walked among the first humans, shaping their knowledge, their technology, their faith. They were the Shad'Heptu, the forgotten architects, the true first rulers of the Nile. They had built structures before the pyramids, before even the sands had settled. Not temples to gods, but prisons, locks. Because they had discovered something buried deep within the earth itself. And they had paid the price. The Shad'Heptu had been erased from history, wiped from the records of time, their knowledge buried under the weight of forgotten ages. The few who remained had vanished into the darkness, existing just beyond the edge of perception until now. Because Nahil and his team had broken the seal. They had let them out. Romi's breath hitched. Professor, it's still here. The shadow twisted unnaturally, shifting through forms, its presence seeping into their very being. Nahil felt something inside him stir, something ancient and cold, as if the entity had left a piece of itself behind. Then, for the first time, the shadow did something truly horrifying. It smiled. Not with a face, not with a mouth, but with a feeling. A promise. You will remember us. The next moment, it was gone. The air lightened. The night returned to normal. The tomb stood silent once more, its entrance still gaping open. But something had changed. Nahil's reflection in the shards of a broken floodlight flickered, just for a moment, into something inhuman. His skin turned cold. They hadn't just released something into the world. It had left a part of itself inside them. And it was waiting. Nahil staggered back, his breath shallow. The weight of what had just happened pressed against his chest like an unseen hand. His reflection in the broken floodlight flickered again, only for a second, but he had seen it. His own eyes, black as the void, staring back at him. Romi clutched his head, his voice barely above a whisper. It's inside me. Amira trembled, gripping her arms as if trying to stop something from crawling beneath her skin. I can still hear them. The others were dazed, some standing in stunned silence, others mumbling in languages they did not speak. The presence, the Shad'Heptu, had left the tomb, but it had not gone far. It had chosen them. Nahil's mind raced. He was a scientist, an Egyptologist. He had spent his life deciphering ancient texts, reconstructing lost histories. But this was not history. This was something else entirely. We need to leave, he said, forcing strength into his voice. Now. But as he turned, he saw the desert stretching endlessly before them, and for the first time in his life, he wasn't sure it was real anymore. Something was wrong. The stars overhead were shifting, realigning in ways that defied the natural order. Constellations he had known since childhood no longer existed. The ground beneath his feet felt off, not sand, not rock, but something that moved just beneath the surface, like the skin of a living thing. Then came the whispers. Not in his mind this time. All around them. The dunes shifted, rising and falling, taking form. Shapes, humanoid but featureless, began emerging from the sand. Not bodies. Echoes. The remnants of those who had uncovered the tomb before them. They moved without sound, without purpose, trapped in an endless cycle of forgotten memory. Their presence was not hostile, nor welcoming. They were simply there, a testament to those who had also ignored the warning. Professor, Amira's voice cracked. We never left. Nahil turned, his blood turning to ice. The entrance to the tomb was still there. Still open. They hadn't moved at all. They had walked away. Yet they were still standing in the same place. The realization hit like a hammer to the skull. They weren't trapped in the tomb. The tomb was now inside them. And it was spreading. The weight of the revelation crashed over Nahil like a collapsing pyramid. His breath hitched, his heartbeat thundering in his ears. The tomb was inside them. Not just a place, but a presence, a reality shifting around them. Romy swayed where he stood, gripping his own arms like he was trying to hold himself together. "Professor, I don't feel right." Nahil turned to him and nearly recoiled. Romy's skin was changing. It wasn't morphing, not exactly. But it was forgetting itself. His features blurred for half a second before snapping back into place, like a distorted reflection in rippling water. Amira gasped. "It's happening to us. It's rewriting us." Nahil knew she was right. His own thoughts felt fragmented, like something was pressing into his mind, trying to replace what was there. A single question formed through the haze. How do you escape something that has already become a part of you? The answer came from the figures in the sand. The echoes, the remnants of those who had been here before, stood motionless, their empty faces tilted toward the sky. And then, in eerie unison, they moved. Not toward the tomb. Not toward the expedition team. But toward a point in the desert where nothing should have been. And then Nahil saw it. A second entrance. Not carved from stone. Not built by human hands. It shimmered in the air like a mirage, shifting, unstable, yet unmistakably real. A doorway not made for mortals. Romy clutched Nahil's arm. His fingers were cold. "I think we were meant to see this." Amira swallowed hard. "No. I think we were meant to choose." The realization was gut-wrenching. The tomb had marked them. It had begun to erase them, the way it had erased those before. But the echoes, the ones who hadn't left, had seen another way out. Not back to their world, but into the world of the forgotten. Nahil felt the weight of the choice settle over them. To stay was to fade, to become part of the tomb's endless cycle, to be rewritten until history no longer remembered their names. To go forward, through the impossible doorway, was to step into a reality never meant for human eyes. The missing chapters of history were opening before them. And there was no way to know what was waiting on the other side.